This is the Mojo Dojo. Most people would have a dining room. I decided that we were going to have a traditional Japanese kendo training hall.
Where is David Lee Roth? You know that we need him more than ever now. Where is David Lee Roth? You know that we need him more than ever now. Go out!
This is the room upstairs that I call the mini dojo. Obviously, it's, a training area, but I keep the rock and roll sentiment a little bit with it. You can see there's a television set in the background, and I can listen to the stereo up here. The main dojo downstairs, where we train with a variety of other people, and indeed some of the most famous martial artists alive today have trained down there with us. I keep that really strict. That way, every single time that you go in there, it's no monkeying around, that it's business for sure. And if you do that over the thousands of hours, then that becomes a natural thing, particularly on the days when you don't feel like training, which for me is roughly between Monday and Friday, every day. You may notice some of the things on the wall are familiar. The silver sword there with the banner on the back is from Panama. You remember the Van Halen video? I was doing what's called in Japanese a kata. It's a form. And that's what we practice here. Think of what we do here as cross training. Nobody goes to the gym in order to get great at lifting weights, but you lift weights in order to accomplish much better that which you do, whether you're kicking a football or you're hitting a badminton bird or whatever, riding a bicycle. Here, when you do the forms, and you've always heard the question, especially in the martial arts world, of why do we do forms? It's not real fighting. Well, neither is going to the gym, and neither is jogging first thing in the morning. And every major boxer in the history of the sport has done both to some degree, because it accomplishes better later what you hope to do. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to go downstairs to the main dojo training area, and I have a kendo hall downstairs where we work and where I train. But upstairs here is much more informal. We're not above having a drink, putting on a little music, and carrying on. I like to, do my watching of the news with a little function. I know that never had much luck with the lotus position. At any rate, the style that I do here is generally only a couple of two styles, possibly three. I started my first, the first time that I put on a pair of pants like this was on my birthday in 1966. And I've been training probably every 2 days ever since then. As opposed to doing an instruction video, perhaps an explanation of some of the things that you've seen in a lot of the movies, a lot of the gear that you might see in something like The Last Samurai or a number of the Jet Li's movies and on, you'll become a little more aware of what it is you're seeing, maybe if you see an explanation. And this is the kind of routines that I do, whether it's in the hotel room or whether I do it here at the house or on the rooftop in New York City. Over many summers, people have asked, what kind of routine do you do? What do you eat for breakfast? Do you go to the gym? And I always make the joke that I'm not strong enough for exercise. But this is called shinai. It's just a bamboo sword. It's probably $45 at the local store. You've seen them used in kendo style when we wear the grill work and the armor, and you actually do Japanese fencing with it. We compete in it. You have large corporations now like Citicorp Bank and Xerox who front large teams of kendo players, guys and gals. You get a lot of kids. I think the youngest kid that I've seen in kendo class was 9 years old. And young and old train side by side here. This is when you're actually making the actual touch. You'll see this ultimately someday, probably in the Olympics. There are millions of people who do this as a sport. The American Kendo Federation is worldwide. There's probably several million people in Japan alone who follow through. I think it's the national sport there. And when we go downstairs, I'll show you some of the moves that we use there. In fact, maybe we'll do a little dust up. But this is called Shinai, and with this is the lightest weight. So this is what you're going to actually start with when you start doing the sword arts. And you'll do what's called Suri, which is free swinging, and like so. This is what we all start doing as kids, you know, when we're imitating the pirates, etc. And this is what you start all the beginners out with, because this is the lightest weight that you begin with. The trick to utilizing a sword like this is all in the footwork. Anybody can pretty much swing a stick, but bringing it all to a stop together. Watch how the sword tip stops right with my right foot. Everything stops together. You see how it snaps even when I go back? Boom! You see, when I loosen up my hands like so, it's a lot like holding a violin bow. And even when we move to a full-scale sharp sword, which we will, that weighs about as much as a gallon of milk. And when you watch my hands up above my head, when I grip it too hard, look what happens with that sword. You see how it raises? You want to keep your hands nice and loose. You don't want to grip, okay? Like so. Stay nice and loose. Now watch how everything goes and stops together. See how that works? Even when I move my feet, everything stops very crisply, like so. See how that works? And you can make nice moves like this, so that you can practice. Boom. Whoosh.
I just got to splurge. I'm a slave to all my desires. Well, my life's a mess, 'cause I can't repress all of these bad habits. So all of these bad habits. Ooh, all of these bad habits.
It's going to get a little funnier the more we drink here. Like all the great samurai, I drink. Oh, they did, man. Half of them lived in the red light district, the Yoshiwara. It's called the floating world. That's what it's called, man. Cool, huh? You'll see woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, from feudal era Japan, 1600s, called Pictures from the Floating World. And half of the people that you see in there are professional swordsmen, professional fencers, whatever. They would actually live in the cat houses and the tea houses. They would live in the theaters, etc. And just a quick aside here, you have a concept. Fuck the quick aside. Okay, here we go. Once you've learned a little bit about your footwork, standing up and making your moves, etc., then you start the actual work. Much like the rock climbing, you can do any of these moves probably tomorrow. If you're reasonably in shape, not an issue. So why are you doing it? Over the thousands of hours, you begin to build a base, a solid base there, and you start to reinform your very character, because you're going to be training when you don't want to train. I make jokes about that all the time. You're going to be training when you'd rather be somewhere else. You're going to be training when you're hurt. You're going to get hurt, etc., etc., etc. And over the period of years and years, I've been doing this for years, that's when you develop that calm. And that is the traditional, when you see an Asian swordsman, that is the calm that you try to obtain here. I'm going to describe a number of the moves to you as we go through them, so that when we go downstairs with the real uniform and everything, which is a lot of distraction, then you know a little bit more what to look for. And anytime you see a martial arts movie, when they're using the Japanese longsword or the staff, anything like that, you're going to see all of these moves. The trick to this, Olympic scoring, so to speak, is watching the footwork. The footwork is what is the most difficult here. So we do these kinds of forms, kata they're called, in order to build into your muscle memory, if there's in fact such a thing, that you don't have to think, you don't have to even respond, that it's just part of you. And of course we do it in a very grand kind of fashion, because if you can do the big moves successfully, then when trouble happens after dark, God forbid, then you can use those kinds of movements, whatever it is. in a much shorter and quicker way. And some of your opening kata, again with the lightweight bamboo sword, this is what the beginners start with. Come up something like this. Watch the feet. All the trick is in the feet. Like so. Draw the sword up, boom, and forward. Sky to earth. You want that sword to be just as perpendicular as you can. Block. Judy. Now we're going to go up very slowly. Watch how this works. Wow. Everything stops at once. See how that works? You're going to sheath the sword. And watch how everything stops at once. See how that works? And everything stops at once. No wasted motion. I used to date a girl who did the exact same move to me every frickin' Friday night. She's gone now, but I learned the move. That's breakdancing. We move second to a heavier sword. These are wooden swords, and they're for training exercise. This is called kaigata, which is a boat oar. It's not an actual boat oar, but obviously somebody started to move towards training with a real boat oar at some point in time. So this is shaped just like that, weighs about 3 times as much as the shinai, which is the bamboo sword that we were just working with here. And obviously takes a whole lot more effort. This little puppy weighs probably about 2.5 pounds, 1/3 of a gallon. If you were out there buying a gallon of milk or whatever, figure if 2/3 of this was going, how much? It'll start to really build in here, all of this kind of muscle in here. It's a really practical kind of sword. And again, you're always using the form. Even though it's made out of wood, you're always working here like so, boom, and bop. You see how that stops? How quickly that works, okay? I'm going to use the same thing. You didn't know what to expect, so I'm going to do the exact same move. Watch how crisply that moves, even though it weighs as much as a pair of shoes. Here we go. You're going to draw. See how that stops? And it's perpendicular. Now, I'm still maintaining that sword perpendicular. And this is how you're going to build that wrist. If nothing else, next time you work the computer, motherfucker, you're going to fly. Ultimately, when you finally worked out your balance and all of your leg work and your general confidence, you're going to move to a real sword. This is unsharpened, but it's got a point to it, and it's got enough of an edge that if you're not sharp with it, it'll cut you. So you take your time, and you got to work out all of your grounding, your base, it's called. And that can take you up to about 18 months before you start to graduate to something like this. And here, you're going to use all of these skills I described earlier to start to move into doing forms. Again, this is not an instructional video, but so you can kind of discern what you're looking at when we do move into the big room. And ultimately, when we go to New York, where all my gear is, and we'll be doing all of these moves with sharp swords, the real deal, a live blade that it's called. So, again, nice crisp moves, everything finishes all together. Everything moves in sequence. Watch how I move. Everything stops at once. You can hear that. Like so. Everything stops at once. No wasted movement, not stiff.
See you in the funny papers, guess that's where I'll be.
Welcome to my house. What you see in the background is the Mojo Dojo. I've talked about it many times in the radio and in interviews and so forth. This is where I train. This is where all the martial arts takes place, and I've talked about that incessantly for years. And this is the first time that I'm really kind of showing what goes on behind the scenes here. A lot of fellas do running, jogging, a lot of fellas do lifting weights. It's all great, simply not the way that I was trained as a little kid. The name of the style that I do is called Aishinryu. It is an old style of Iaido sword drawing, and this is the way that we build a nice, strong base of, the lower half. Think of it, the leg work is always the more difficult than actually just swinging the sword, which is the fun part. What I'm wearing is a non-regulation uniform. I'm wearing the white top because it's a little bit easier to see in the video. But these kinds of, they're pants actually. Don't move the camera. I'm going to just stand up and show you here what we have going. These are actually just really large pants, and you've seen everybody from the Seven Samurai to Tom Cruise wearing these kinds of pants. When it's winter time, you can bunch them up and tie them at the bottom. You can ride a horse in these kinds of pants, but it's kind of a 1600s version of King Arthur's sweatpants. You can also layer on a whole lot of kimonos underneath here, and you get that layering effect when it's getting cold and it's getting to be winter time. But it's a familiar sight. A lot of people don't know that they're actually pants, is what they are. And the rest of it, this is the kind of the uniform top that you would see for judo, jiu-jitsu. You're going to see it in kendo. Really hasn't changed much since probably the 1300s. And welcome to the Mojo Dojo.
So those three moves, we combine. For example, and then you go back to first. Go that way. Or you can go first. If you go from the first to the third, you go around back that way, and back around, like that. First to second, we did first to third, so now we'll go second to first, which is second, first, second, first. And then from second to third, it's second here, and then third. And then from here, second, third. So third to first is first. Third, second. So, so those are the patterns that you can do. And you can do that as you like. So for example, go first twice, and then do the second, do the third, I'm kind of losing track here, but and so in the end, you you get to the point where you want to do this sort of movement along with these moves. And especially when you do the third, you have to make sure you don't hit the floor. And be very careful like this. That's very cool. Yeah, these are pretty cool moves.
The house is from 1924, so everything like in this room is made of wood and iron and only the basics, and it has a tremendous amount of give when we start moving your feet like that. It's a large part of what we do in kendo and the sword drawing, so it makes it almost priceless to the lifetime martial artist. I have a lot of folks who comment on that this is one of the, a lot of the martial arts that we practice now were perfected at the turn of the century and up through the 20s here. So again, I don't recommend that you rush right out and grab yourself a sword or start doing any of these moves. It's simply a demonstration of what I do behind the scenes to maintain what I do in rock and roll here. And I'm going to do a variety of forms and kata, etc. Keep in mind some of the things I described earlier, how those moves operate and what it looked like when I was wearing traditional pants. The forms that I'm about to do haven't really changed since the 1500s, and you'll see me doing them throughout our programming in the future. You're going to see me on rooftops or out on the porch or in the hotels and whatnot. And it's just a form of exercise. It's a form of meditation, probably more than anything else. I never had much luck with the lotus position, just sitting still. So here we get.